of the Town of Clayton, I'd like to call this regular Town Council meeting to order. I'd like to ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Most gracious and heavenly Father, we stop to give you thanks for all the many blessings you bestowed upon us this day. We ask, Lord, now that you be with us as we proceed with the business for the Town of Clayton. For it's in your great name we pray. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
There are no adjustments, Mayor.
The one slight adjustment is that one of our employees, Michael Carpenter, was not able to be with us this evening, so we will introduce him on the June 17th agenda.
All right. So up next is your consent agenda.
Motion approved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Up next under administrative item is the recommendation of advisory board appointment.
Yes, currently there is one vacancy on the Public Art Advisory Board. It's an unexpired term, and staff and the board are recommending that we appoint Howard Manning to fill that term, and the term would expire December 31st of this year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve that appointment to the Public Art Advisory Board. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. And the motion carries. All right, up next is introduction and special presentations. We'll begin with the employee introduction and promotions.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I was in here, I think, last meeting, introduced one of my guys. So I've got another gentleman here behind me who's done an outstanding job for the Town of Clayton. He started off as Electric Line Tech 1, and we're here tonight to acknowledge his promotion to Electric Line Tech 3, which is a lot of school work, a lot of hard work to get to that level. We just don't give it to him. So he's really earned it. He also represented the Town of Clayton in the Nick Ames Lineman Rodeo a couple of weeks ago. He represented us very well, done outstanding, very close to scoring at the top. I think he's about a year or two away, and he'll make us proud. So without further ado, this introduce John Beasley, our new Electric Line Tech 3.
Thank you. I want to take the opportunity of working with the town. Learned a lot. I come from Pike Electric, was underground, and come over here and we do overhead and underground. So learned a lot, having a lot of fun, and enjoying it.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah. Up next is a presentation of recognition to the Chi Zeta. And I would like to read this proclamation first, and then I would like to present it to you down front, and then I would like a group photograph. I didn't realize I was wearing the color, but I did good. Recognition. Whereas Chi Xi Zeta was founded on June 7th, 2009, and will celebrate 10 years of service to the community. And whereas since its conception in 2009, Chi Xi Zeta chapter has strived to and continues to build its presence in the Clayton community. And whereas the Chi Xi Zeta has participated in numerous community service events, including participating in the Clayton Harvest Festival for the past 9 years, and also began volunteering at Derby Days in May of 2018. Whereas the chapter has partnered with Harbor Incorporated and the Clayton Center with the vision to better serve the local community. And whereas to date, Chi Xi Theta has awarded over $4,000 in book scholarships to high school seniors and college freshmen residing in and around the Johnston, Carey County area. and also sponsor 3 youth groups for girls ages 3 through 18 who meet monthly to participate in educational and community service activities. Whereas the chapter has recently partnered with other members of the National Pan-Hellenic Council and North Carolina Med Assistant to sponsor and volunteer at its first free pharmacy held in Johnston County, making it possible for over 800 members of the community to access over-the-counter medication at no cost to them. Whereas Casas, Zita takes great pride in being a part of an inclusive organization that welcomes all women who will dedicate themselves to the causes for which it stands. And now, therefore, the Honorable Mayor and the Town Council of the Town of Clayton, North Carolina, hereby recognize Friday, June 7th, 2019 as Chi Xi Zeta Day. Further, we encourage all our citizens to celebrate, support, and recognize the work of this chapter for what they have done and continue to do by serving our community. Duly adopted on this 3rd day of June, 2019, while in regular session. Thank you for your contribution. All right, up next under public hearings will be the 2019-12 ANX East Clayton Elementary School annexation, which is continued, I believe. And we have tabled this until the July 15th. Is that still good with council? Awesome. So we will table that one until July the 15th, 2019. Then up next will be the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget presentation, which is continued from our last meeting.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Council. My name is Adam Ramsey. I am the Town Manager, and we are going to continue our discussion that we've been having for several months now related to the annual budget. So just to recap, we have spent the past few years really evaluating something around 40 different general fund capital project needs and wants based on this town council's priorities. And if I could summarize those priorities into 3 distinct but important categories, they are related to transportation, public safety, and parks and recreation. And I'll highlight in just a moment how your priorities have trickled down into actual dollars spent across those areas. But just so everyone understands, that capital projects are significant projects that have high costs and must also have a useful life that span over many years. Examples of capital projects might include things like streets, buildings, and parks. So it is important to have a capital improvement plan which is sometimes called a CIP, in order to manage the timing and the high cost and the complexity of these projects. Clayton's CIP includes cost estimates, how we'll pay for them, when we'll pay for them, and even estimates how each project will impact the recurring or the annual operating budget. So in this year, the CIP and the annual balanced budget are both spending plans that council's been discussing and guiding both as part of the annual budget adoption process. So even though the CIP covers the next 5 years, how to pay for all 5 years is tied directly to the revenues in this year's budget. Ultimately, with the help of the town's financial advisor, Davenport and Company, and Ted Cole from Davenport Company is here, and I'm going to ask him to get up in just a moment. But we have 31 capital projects that were selected and included in a 5-year capital improvement plan. And before I go over each of those projects, I want to come back to the comment I just had about the council's priorities about public safety, transportation, and parks and recreation. And you can see from this summarized list, at least, that many of the dollars, and what amounts to about a $70 million capital improvement plan, many of those dollars are targeted towards those 3 categories. You can see public safety at the top, approximately $22 million. Transportation, close to $20 million at 18.5, and then parks and recreation at 16. And then there are 2 other projects that are not projects but categories. Library, you can see, is a large one, but most of the dollars are actually targeted at coming from an outside revenue stream, which I'll explain in just a moment. So the capital improvement plan. So I know this is difficult to read, and if you're near a screen, you could potentially see that, but I'm going to go through each of the projects because they're so critical to how this budget has shaped up. But also important to note is that the dollars that we're spending may in fact be coming from different sources, and that's something that I'll ask Davenport to address in just a moment. But a good plan then isn't all just tax dollars or all dollars from fees. We're looking at outside revenue streams, possibly grants, and how we might actually finance dollars and spread them out so we can get more leverage for a dollar by spreading those costs out. So all of those factors are brought into this. Then, of course, the timing of when those projects happen are going to play a big factor in this capital improvement plan. So first project on the list has to do with and I'm going to call it a replacement fire station. So this would be a project in a few years where we would actually relocate what is currently fire station to a yet to be determined location. Part of the reason for that is we've realized as we've grown and expanded that the fire stations are maybe too close to each other. And so having them a little more separated will enhance our coverage ability in our 5-mile radius requirement that we try to achieve for not only for insurance purposes, but for public safety related reasons. This project is one of those what might fall into a want versus a need list, but we say that we believe there's an opportunity with regional partners, could be other fire departments, could be local industry, it could be grant dollars from the state, but to have a state-of-the-art training facility near or at our new fire station location, which would only enhance the opportunities for training, and not just our fire department, but we believe regionally could be a good feature, which is why a lot of the cost in the CIP for this actually come from outside sources, because we believe we could be successful at getting additional dollars to pay for that. The next few projects you're going to see are related to fire apparatus. Currently, the town does not have a platform or ladder truck. As we continue to expand, and I mean that in vertically and not just horizontally, it's important having these capabilities. And the town has debated and discussed ladder trucks. And again, in this year's budget, we've discussed this at length, and we've even begun to set aside some dollars for that project. But the idea is that eventually we are going to need a ladder truck, and we're continuing to partner with our neighbors that do in the meantime. We have some replacement trucks. One is a 15-year-old pumper tanker you can see in the picture here, and then another 15-year-old fire engine Pierce Enforcer is also on there. So we have a few trucks, and these make it onto the list simply because they're large, like I said, they're high cost and they have a long life. and it's not something you necessarily have every year in the budget. The beginnings of another fire station are in the CIP as well. There's a picture here. These are just designs. That doesn't mean what they will necessarily look like. But we have some of the design work in the later years of the CIP as we begin to think about a third fire station. Again, that was based on the fire study that we had completed a few years ago now, showing that as the area grows, that eventually we will need additional fire stations. But to the same theme that we've mentioned, we're looking creatively at, with our partner fire departments across the region, at possibly doing some kind of multi-department fire stations and trying to leverage coverage and cost with our partners, since we already work so closely together. The library is in the CIP, but this is a project that you all heard a presentation about a few months ago. What you're looking at is an aerial of the current location of the library, and it looks like it's being covered by a large box, but that really is meant to symbolize the amount of space that's on that current site. The existing facility is, and Joyce here, I'm gonna mess my numbers up, but it's 2,500, 8,900 is the current space, but we could go to 25,000, that was the number I was thinking of, possibly square foot in a library. But again, a lot of the dollars that are in the budget, the CIP, I should say, are based on us leveraging with outside, maybe doing a private public partnership opportunity, which we've seen in other communities in our country, and we think this might be a unique place to do something like that. And so we're gonna go down that route and see what we find, but potential is there for a much larger library space if that's something that the council and the community want to do in a few years. You'll see several park-related things, and the first one there is the municipal park. This park is most well-known now because that's where we hold our 4th of July celebration, but it's one of, if not our oldest park in town, and it's showing its age and its wear. And so one of the projects in the capital improvement plan is a significant upgrade to our municipal park and reusing that space, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Second park location is going to be our community center, and you can see a photo here of this wonderful space that is regularly utilized by residents and kids of all ages, and it's certainly one of our focal attraction and points in our Parks and Recreation program. But there are some things that aren't finished there. One of the projects is going to be how do we get all the parking finished around that facility, and some upgrades to the facility itself, including the opportunity to expand off the back end of that facility, which would be designated, at least during the daytime, Monday through Friday, potentially as a senior center or a senior program center where they could use that space, and then it would be used for programs and other activities in the evenings and on the weekends. Again, if you haven't been out to the rec center during any athletic season, you're missing out on a lot of activity. The Lindsay kids included do a lot of activities out there. Another park, really popular park, is our Clayton Community Park. This is as near the location we were just mentioning. But again, as at least the Lindsay family participates out there, we realize that our parking is at a premium and they're all over the place. The facilities themselves are in desperate need of some upgrades. And so there's a major cost related to enhancing this park and making it better utilized, not only for the current but future needs of our community. And then, of course, we have the East Clayton Community Park, which is largely known for its soccer facility, but also there's a nice baseball field, and we have rugby out there and other activities. And we'll talk about Harmony Playground in a minute, but it's the dog park is right across from that as well. One of our most utilized parks, but again, the theme that we've come back to is these parks often aren't finished. Parking's not finished, there's not lighting, the fields themselves. We're looking at going to a turf kind of approach where we don't have as high maintenance in the grass, and that they can be utilized year-round, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So we have in the East Clayton Community Park, an exciting project that you all have heard about, and some of you are heavily involved in, is getting our Harmony Playground, or we sometimes call it an inclusive playground. But I'm hesitant to use that term because while it is inclusive, it's a playground for all of us. And all kids of all abilities will be able to use that. And there are some costs, though, related to getting again, the parking and handicap accessibility to that site, and then the bathrooms meeting handicap accessibility requirements as well. I've been here a few budgets, and we've had people show up and talk to us about how important our trail system are, and our bikings in particular, and some of our more avid recreation bikers. This isn't me out there, but there's those that go on these trails, and there is one project in here to include some additional mountain biking trails along near the Riverwood community, or near the river, going out that way along the Greenway Trail. And we are leveraging some outside dollars to help us accomplish that project. Thinking downtown this is obviously one of our priority focal points. This is a type of stage structure as we're looking at how to enhance our downtown, our town square, which is where we hold many events, including music and movies and other activities. Having something of a permanent stage. Right now, we're incurring cost every year as we bring in stages multiple times throughout the year and setting up and taking down. Having a more permanent structure and reconfiguring of the square itself to accommodate more people on the square and better parking around the perimeter of the square. So this is certainly in the capital projects plan as well. We've talked about Horn Square and maybe rethinking some of those things, and maybe adding some more features to that to make it more of a destination and not just a parking destination, to enhance the business community around our downtown, attracting people maybe 7 days a week to come enjoy our downtown spaces. Just generally speaking, there's, vehicles in general are in your capital improvement plan. We have everything from emergency police to fire to our public works and other vehicles, and so those you see on a schedule in our capital improvement plan. While the police department is relatively new and doesn't need any significant changes, there are a few costs in some future years for finishing out some spaces that were designed for future growth, and we believe that the day will come where we're going to need to build out some of those spaces, whether it's offices or cubicle structures, to just keep that building functioning for us. Parking is again one of those transportation needs that we talk about a lot, and we've been discussing this with council, and downtown parking, this town hall parking lot, whether this is what it looks like or something similar, is a project that is included in your capital improvement plan. Then we talked about greenways, and we're excited to see that the Sam's Branch Phase 2 project is very close to being underway, or is actually breaking ground. On the right, you can see the tunnel, a picture of what the tunnel might look like going underneath of Cover Bridge Road. And may be difficult to see, but on the picture on the left, the trail itself, the orange line, is actually taking the trail up towards the municipal park area, which would make a connection of our Greenway Trail that you could then, in fact, get to our downtown through our Greenway Trail system. We, of course, leverage a lot of state dollars on that project. This is a transportation project, a road connectivity along Cover Bridge Road that connects the Riverwood community. This project will help for a couple reasons, at least. One is our fire protection covers. That puts much of that community into our 5-mile protection radius that we need for insurance purposes, and allows us to avoid some costs right now that we're having to pay another fire department to cover that for us. It also lets us get in some needed water lines connections to help improve and maintain our water quality in that neighborhood. Parking is again something you all have talked about at length. What you're looking at are some concepts as well as parking that could happen along the railroad corridor along First Street. You can see the Horn Square parking, and then just took a sort of a snippet of what First Street might look like going all the way down, all the way to O'Neill or Cover Bridge Road. And part of that excitement of that connectivity is we could actually see a punch through and make that an actual functioning street, where you, right now, what you know behind the HR building is a dirt and not really an improved street at all. The potential is that could become an actual thoroughfare for us and greater connectivity in our downtown. All right. Some other just internal needs with our operations center. We are constantly shuffling, and we've outgrown many of our space needs. There's storage needs, there's office needs, there's equipment needs, and making this important that we look at this now, even if we say we can sort of live on top of each other for a little while longer. NCDOT is looking at this same corridor for some road connections. And in some scenarios, they're thinking of bringing their road up on the left side of our property and actually taking some of our parking and loading area. But either that side or the other, it's going to have an impact on our operation, and we need to understand our space needs, where we can house our people, and that, of course, has all of our public works and electric department and all their equipment and people are that facility. Roads, this is one of the top priorities that we all hear about from our community, and this council is taking that seriously by funding roads at a level that's never been done in the town of Clayton. If you look back just 5 years ago, annual budget was somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 per year. In this capital improvement plan, you're seeing funding that exceeds $1 million on an annual basis. And that is significant. And while it won't get us all the way caught up quickly, it certainly is a step in the right direction. And we're going to make great strides on our street road structures. And that's going to be everything from resurfacing to sometimes having to dig under the roads and replace water and sewer lines. And there's just a combination of things you have to do. But we have so much to do, and that funding level is going to be very, very helpful. Something else that we need to accomplish, and we've begun, is making sure that our infrastructure is ADA or handicap accessible and compliant with the law. And NCDOT is mandating this happen, and we have I will say many, but a few years that we're going to be coming into compliance. But these are things like sidewalks that need to be ADA compliant to our buildings. Getting in and out of them need to be ADA compliant. Our crosswalks and other things of that nature. And we're doing an assessment right now to see where we are out of compliance, and then we'll come up with a plan that will span several years that is also funded in this capital improvement plan. Sidewalks are always a popular thing, especially when you're missing them or they're not in good shape. And what this CIP is doing is it's allowing us to create a sidewalk master plan so we can look around town at where we have connectivity failings. Maybe Where the Sidewalk Ends is one of my favorite books from a kid, right? So we need to see where the sidewalks don't match up and where they should. Another priority of connectivity in this town, especially to our downtown. And then cost each year to make sure that we can maintain those sidewalks. They're going to need grinding and resurfacing when things happen to them. So that's in the CIP. And as we mentioned, there's larger equipment like dump trucks that are well used and get well worn out by the end of their life, and we need to budget for those through a capital plan because they're not something that we pay for each and every year. Another big project, this is really an NCDOT project with the widening of NC 42, where the town's coming into this is our planning department successfully discussed with the NCDOT to actually design for us, but a greenway, if I'm saying that right, David, a greenway trail that will allow pedestrian and bike connectivity along this stretch of road. And so that's going to be a true huge project to us. Again, most of the money is coming from NCDOT, but the town's dollars will kick in to make sure that we've got that multimodal connectivity, which is so vital to our community and vital to our theme, which is a premier community for active families. So that is, in essence, all of the projects that are included in our 5-year capital improvement plan. And the reason I'm talking about those so much is because the funding for that plan begins this year in the proposed budget. And so the question that we need to make sure that our community understands is that the tax rate isn't changing. And if we keep it at the 58 cents, which is what is in the recommended budget, why will taxes go up? So why would someone's individual tax responsibility increase? And what are those other fees that are going up, and why are we doing that too? And so this is, I guess, a data point we've created to show what could be happening. And I have to say it that way because everyone's property value is different and everyone's consumption of water is different. So I can't say this is exactly what will happen to your bill, but I can create a scenario that is reflective, we think, of a typical or average resident who is a property owner. And what we do know is that based on the latest census data, the median home value in the town of Clayton is now $166,800. So we chose that as our price point for this example. We also know that a typical consumer of water is usually around 5,000 gallons. Now, the next highest consumption threshold is probably 4,000, so some are going to fall below that. But we're going to say from a cross-section, 5,000 is a pretty good number to use. And then, of course, we have our water, our utility bills themselves for our solid waste. So those are the three areas where our residents will see cost increases most likely. For a typical or that median home value, if you keep the tax rate at 58 cents, they're going to see for Clayton taxes $174 increase in their annual cost. And then for the water consumption, which is water sewer combined, you're going to see an $11, almost $12 increase per month. And then for our trash, you're going to see just shy of a $2.50 per month increase. And we're talking about bills, and we pay our water sewer bills monthly. We usually pay our taxes annually, although if you escrow, you may be paying that monthly as well. So what we did is we tried to break that down into two different ways. One was show the annual impact for both of those changes, and then the monthly impact for those changes. So on an annualized basis, those increases, for this particular home, which happens to be the median value home, is around $344 per year. If you break that or divide that by 12, then you're looking at something just shy of $30 more per month. Now, granted, the water and sewer bill amount and the sewer don't pay for capital. Those, as far as the general fund capital that we just mentioned, those are supporting those enterprises that are happening. So what you are seeing is that, just for rounding purposes, you're seeing approximately $15 per month for our residents when it comes to their tax bill to support that capital improvement plan that I just mentioned. And I think that's an important feature that the council was considering. And so that's the answer, at least to the question that, okay, if we're not changing the tax rate, why are my taxes going up? And it has everything to do with revaluation. And we need to state that the town does not do revaluation. We don't set property values. The county does that. And just like when in a non-revaluation year, if someone's property value increases, the tax rate, if it stays the same, which we'll say it typically does, then they're going to pay additional taxes when that value of their property increases, whether they buy another vehicle or a second vehicle that they haven't had or a newer vehicle, they're going to see an impact to their tax bill typically. If they do any kind of improvements to their property, they're likely to see an increase to their taxes. Well, the revaluation is like that, in that an independent tax assessor hired by the county is going around and valuing property. And in this case, it's happening every 8 years. So they're trying to capture the property value change from what was 8 years ago. We don't tell people that we value property, and if they have a question or a challenge to their property value, we encourage them to go speak to the county, to the tax department. There is a process to appeal and challenge property value if you believe it has been done incorrectly, and I know many instances where folks have successfully challenged that and had their property values adjusted. Now, sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes you want your property valued more because of the way you have your mortgage set up. But the reality is that is a process that's legally mandated by the state and is handled by the county. And Clayton, of course, we set our tax rate, but we don't set the property values. We try through this spreadsheet. We would like people to know how they can figure out what their new tax bill would be. And we wish that there was an easier way for us to figure that out by each property, but you kind of have to go through two different links to get there through the county. But if you know your values, you can do it fairly simply. But following the links, you can figure that out. But if you know what your tax value was before the reassessment and you know what your new value is, you're simply going to subtract those from each other, and then you have a new value, and you divide that by 100, and you multiply that by 58 cents, and that's going to be the new amount you're going to pay in your taxes. And we would invite and encourage anyone and everyone to do that, to know what their impact is going to be. Like I said, we use an 18% growth rate. We really don't know. We saw growth rates as low as 3%, and we've seen them higher than 18% in the 20s. So we know it's going to be scattered what that impact is going to be. The reality is wherever you set that tax rate, most people are going to pay a different amount in their taxes next year, no matter what you set the tax rate at, because values didn't change equally. And so we encourage everyone to go figure out what that is. As we mentioned last time, the water and sewer rate increases have everything to do with us maintaining a water and sewer utility. And that is like a own business, and it has to self-support. It's not supported by your tax dollars, which is exactly how you want it to be. But as costs go up and our needs increase, you're seeing this almost statewide, probably nationwide, that the cost to provide utilities is increasing. Last time we checked, the county was also going to see some significant increases in their water sewer bills. The solid waste has to do with our trash collection. This is, while it's a lower cost increase, it still is, if you add it in there, it still is significant, and we are sensitive to that. We contract with All-Star Waste Services to collect our trash, and they've done a fantastic job, and I think most folks have been very pleased with that service, but we're adding our seasonal loose leaf collection to them, and so that's a cost that we're bearing, and we're passing on to the customers to help support that function. So that's why their normal cost increases due to fuel and overhead charges that they see, plus that little bit more, which is helping us avoid some cost on the back end, because we had reached a point with our equipment that we were going to have to replace our loose leaf truck and our pull behind trailer, and even begin adding people to manage all of our public works needs. So the timing just lined up this year to be able to transition over to All-Star to avoid some cost to our citizens. So the next question is, and this was posed to me just last week, and I thought we should talk about this, is would Clayton have raised my taxes this year if it weren't a revaluation year? And I think that's a fair question. So Council has been discussing these and other capital needs and wants for many years, and tasked staff with developing a specific plan, which is the capital improvement plan, for these past 2 years. They have always intended Council to put a referendum before the voters for support for some of the CIP projects, which I'll discuss in a moment. As presented, they may put an $18 million general obligation bond referendum on the November 2019 ballot. Just as a reminder, municipalities may only put voter-approved bond referendums onto odd-year election ballots. That's according to North Carolina law. Counties go in even years, we go in odd years. And it has to do with how our election cycles line up. So Clayton, as I said, does not assign values or assess properties. This function is handled by the county. Clayton sets its own tax rate and may choose to lower the tax rate any given year, but faces more pressure to do so, certainly in a revaluation year. The pressure to lower the tax rate is based on the idea of developing a budget that is revenue neutral. In this year's case, that would be a 49-cent tax rate increase. Timing of the reevaluation was coincidental, but certainly is playing a big role in the consideration and ultimate decision on where to set the tax rate. Based on the financial analysis from our financial advisors, Davenport, it was determined that holding the tax rate would enable Council to implement a nearly $70 million 31 project CIP. And I'm going to invite Ted Cole to join me up here, and I'd like him to address what their role is as financial advisors, a little bit of how they do this, not just for Clayton, but maybe around the region, and just discuss the process, because we went through several scenarios and why this council settled on the one that we did. So, Ted?
Good evening. Ted Cole with Davenport and Company. We are the town's financial advisor and have been for probably over a decade, a good 10, 15 years. Most of our work with the town revolves around the planning for capital projects, the execution or funding of those projects, and we've done a number of those transactions over the years. And just, you know, tagging on to a little bit about what the manager had said, we've seen some particular progress in this planning effort over the last few years, and you all as a council and your predecessors have made some tough decisions in terms of earmarking some dollars, additional pennies on the tax rate. I think it was a year ago, 3 pennies to dedicate towards the capital program, budgeting certain ways for your debt and for your pay-go capital when you could have freed up some dollars for some other needs. And you've really set yourselves up, in my opinion, to, you know, take on a CIP like this and a potential bond referendum in a very positive way. A couple of things that have evolved in all of the planning work. As the manager said, I'm going to round up about $70 million worth of projects that have been identified and prioritized, and you went through a very good process in soliciting those projects from your department heads and justification, rationale, prioritization. So I think that's all a very positive process that a number of local governments are working to get up and running, and this I would hold out as a good model for a smaller and growing community in terms of how you've approached the CIP process. The other thing I think that's important when we look at that roughly $70 million of projects, almost 30% of it has been identified to be funded from outside sources. So grants, donations, the Claytex, other than sort of what I'll call direct town revenues. So 30% of that from outside sources, almost 16 million or 20% of it in a pay-go annual cash contribution. And at 32 million potentially, about 50% of it in debt. So you have developed a very balanced approach to the capital. You're not over-reliant on any one source of funding. Again, about 50% funded through expected debt, 20% in cash, which is a very strong number. That is a very sustainable trend, or it certainly creates flexibility for you all in the future. And what debt we have assumed in the model, we have set up in a way, one, that the Local Government Commission in Raleigh is going to feel strongly about, and secondly, as a result, it's the type of debt that pays down every year. So year one, the debt payment will be higher than year two, and so on. And two things that are important to that. It tends to hit your budget the hardest in the first year because it's the highest level debt service, and then it steps down over time. But it also creates future debt capacity because we know this roughly 5-year period out to 2024, 70 million, you know, you're going to be adding a year to this CIP every year, and there will be other needs as you continue to grow. So you've got a balanced approach to funding the CIP that's been identified in this plan and ultimately in your budget. And it's been modeled in a way, I think, that's very conservative and in a way that will be well received, to the extent this is an important part of your decision, well received by the rating agencies and the credit, the bond investing community. You've got a very solid AA bond rating right now. I don't think there's anything over time that this plan will do to hold that rating back. In other words, yes, it's a big CIP, but when you're growing, you have needs, and oftentimes it requires debt to fund it. So I think this plan, maybe contrary to what you might think, does not preclude the opportunity to improve that bond rating in the future. In fact, I think it demonstrates that you're taking care of your needs, you're managing the growth that's inevitably going to come, and we can demonstrate that it's being done in a straightforward and conservative fashion. So I think those were some of the key points I wanted to make. This is all being done in a way that's consistent with your debt policies. Those have been in place for some time now. They were council adopted years ago. And it's funded in a sustainable fashion from current year revenues that you've identified in your budget and also some dollars that you've put aside year over year. And I think the last thing I would say is I certainly understand with this reval that's going on and the revenue neutral rate that's been calculated and what the proposed budget assumes in a tax rate, no small decision for you all to make. We've looked at this a number of different ways. The plan that the budget assumes right now basically pre-funds the CIP in holding the rate where it's been recommended. In other words, this CIP can be funded going forward without additional required revenues or tax increases, whatever you want to call it, however you want to characterize it. Could you get by without the current tax rate and still fund the CIP as it's proposed? There will come a time you'll have to readdress the tax rate. And the slide that the managers put up is projecting about a 7-penny increase needed to fund this same CIP if you were to deal with the tax rate on a year-by-year basis. So the proposed budget at this point basically takes what could be 7 pennies over time and boils them down or reduces them down to about 3 pennies. And you're getting those pennies a little bit earlier than you might otherwise need it, but in doing so, you are able to reduce the number of pennies needed to support this CIP, and your staff has a very good debt and capital budgeting model in place that will allow them to track those pennies, hold those pennies in a segregated account, and be able to use them in the outer years as this debt starts to come online. I don't know if there's anything I might add or questions that you all might have while I'm here, and certainly I'll be here through the end of the meeting if there's something that comes up a little later.
Mr. Granis.
So if we were to go revenue neutral and drop to 49 cents, can you discuss what would actually happen with respect to the bond referendum as far as what we could go for?
Sure. So my understanding is, I want to double check my math here, that the proposed 58-cent rate is 9 pennies above revenue neutral, and 3 of those are anticipated to be added to this capital plan.
The answer to your question is you wouldn't be able to do any of the bond referendum if you went back to revenue neutral. You've got 3 pennies to work with, but you'd have to go back through the projects, and what you'd likely see is that the capital needs would then supplant the capital wants. And the general obligation bond referendum is focused on those wants. And so this scenario here would represent if you kept everything in the CIP as is, but you lowered the tax rate to say 55 cents this year, you'd be looking at a 7-penny increase in about 3 or 4 years if you were to keep everything as is, right? That's a big assumption, right? But that's just sort of keeping everything whole. But if you were to drop all the way back to revenue neutral, we'd have to go back through every single project and then figure out what did that 3-penny rate increase last year, what would that allow us to do over the next 5 years. But off the top of my head, the needs would then outpace the wants.
So would it be fair to say that worst case would be that we would probably not qualify or would not be prudent to have a bond referendum initiative if we were to make that reduction?
Without going through the projects with you to say for sure, but I would say that would be the likely outcome.
And if we were to reduce the 3 cents that you're talking about, that would also, I assume, reduce the potential amount of bond referendum dollars that we could go after. And what would that be reduced to approximately?
Yeah, when they did that analysis, instead of an 18 million ask, it would be something closer to $11 million.
Something what?
11 million, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
The last thing that I would make a note of, if this plays into your decision as well, is a number of the projects that are on the CIP list, do require an initial investment, whether it's in land acquisition, right-of-ways, things of that nature, engineering and architecture. And generally speaking, the Local Government Commission in Raleigh does not want you borrowing for a project until the project is bid. And so you can be fronting money in a fairly significant amounts in some cases. So part of, I think, the benefit of the proposed budget the way it is it does allow you to build up your reserves for the capital program a little bit earlier and cash flow those initial engineering, architecture, legal costs, whatever they might be, many of which you can reimburse yourselves with when you actually do the debt, but it just makes the timing of the debt and conforming with the Local Government Commission's requirements a little bit easier to cash flow and keep your projects on schedule.
Want to capture this third question here, which is what is the $18 million general obligation bond referendum, which we've been discussing. So from the CIP, I know it's difficult to see, but the blue box on this capital improvement plan represents 5 potential parks and recreation projects. Thank you, Stacy. And I mentioned these last time and ran through them quickly already, but I want to go back through them. I know Scott's here; he could even do a better job than I will, and I think he might later. But you can see the parks and facilities that were highlighted that this council said were a priority to you. And I want to go back to something you all have said, and that is Clayton is a wonderful place, and we're a premier community for active families, and we have a tremendous greenway system. We have tremendous parks and facilities, but we've recognized that we have not finished several of them, or several of them are in dire need of upgrades. And Municipal Park is a great example of one of our oldest parks, if not our oldest park, and it hasn't had a significant investment in more than 20 years. And I'm looking at Nancy because she's been here 20 years. So, but the idea is it is such a strategically located park for us. It's already so well utilized for the 4th of July. But with our partners there with the Civitans, for example, there's just tremendous opportunity to make this park where there's a lot of growth going on around it, the Parkview neighborhood and being one of the foremost. There's just a lot more demand now for this space. And it's in a location that truly your town residents will be able to go there, whether they're walking or driving and doing so much more. And what you'll have heard our Parks and Recreation Director say is we need more multifunctional spaces. So instead of just a ball field or just a soccer field, we need fields that can be used for what we have today and what's coming tomorrow. We need playground equipment that's sorely needed to be upgraded. We need spaces that people can go and do all sorts of things. And of course, parking is always in the middle of that. So the picnic shelters and some kind of structure for entertainment and all these things. So this is one of your most significant upgrades that will be in 10 years' time. The community is going to see this and say, how did we not have this? It'll be that kind of a feature for us. Clayton Community Park, again, such a well-utilized space, such high demand for these fields, but when they're all in use, people can't even park there. And that's a problem, a public safety problem, but it's also an image problem for us. We need to get our parking better enlaced. We need to get our facilities, our restroom facilities, all upgraded to meet the new norms. More spaces for people to meet and gather, such as picnic shelters. And so, again, this project is one of your priorities in getting that space upgraded. East Clayton Community Park. Again, largely known for soccer, but you can't use soccer year-round when the fields are wet or cold. And so what we're proposing is we're going to see artificial turf coming out here, and then it becomes year-round space you can use. Again, the parking lot's not completed, and we mentioned the Harmony Playground. That's going to be a destination location for us. And you want that to be, as you've said, one of your premier parks as these others. And you can tell from the 3 I've just mentioned that we're not focused on one neighborhood. This is across our entire town. These are for all of our residents. And these are our existing, our core, the things that have made Clayton great. We're going to make them even better. Obviously, one of our flagship facilities is our community center. You've heard us talk about basketball and other programs, and we're really one, if not in the region, maybe the only one that's offering basketball, and we get a lot of use out of that space. Certain coach this year took his team to the finals last year. I won't tell you about that, but at any rate, yes, it's a great space. Love our community center. And what we're proposing is getting additional parking there. If you've ever been out to the games there, you know that there's parking in the fields already for most events. But we're also proposing adding on that additional space that's kind of in that lime green color. And that is going to be multifunctional for us. We've got the Center for Active Aging. They're very excited about partnering with us to try to make that space a reality. And they want to be able to utilize that space, especially during the daytime on Monday through Friday for senior programming. But we offer so many programs that already seniors want to do there. So it's just a natural connection for them to be part of that facility. And then we can use it for additional programming needs in the evenings and on the weekends. So in a nutshell, those are the projects, I'm going to go back to this, those are the projects that will be highlighted through a general obligation bond referendum. There's some might point out, but Adam, you said that the cost of those projects are somewhere closer to 13 million. Why would you ask for 18 million? And the answer is not because we think we're necessarily going to borrow 18 million, but because it's a bond referendum, you're asking the people to support those parks and recreation projects. By the time you actually do them, cost may vary, and the financial condition of the town may have improved. And the advantage of a bond isn't whether or not we should do the projects, although that is something we're finding out. It's the ability to borrow at a low interest rate. And by doing that, you're able to leverage the town dollars more. And so financially, our advisors are saying you could ask for a little above what you think you're going to do. And then if rates are favorable and you have additional dollars, if they're available, you can then get those favorable rates. So again, the bond referendum is partly about, do you want us to do these things? And we want to know that. But secondarily, and maybe even more importantly, is trying to get that favorable interest rate, because that gives you more leverage to spend your dollars wisely. So in summary, this is truly a historic budget for the town of Clayton. It's not been easy. It's not been rushed. We've been talking about this for many years in many ways because it's so heavily based on these projects. I think I said last time, if it weren't for the capital improvement plan, this would feel like a very sort of normal budget year for us in all the other areas. But the projects make this significant. And because of the timing of this, and should the council go forward with this and the community embrace the projects, in 7 to 10 years, the town of Clayton is going to see some significant, and I mean that, significant changes and facelifts to the things that we have. It's going to enhance the community in ways that are hard to measure. And what are we asking for is, one, will the voters support that in November? That's always been your plan, to ask them that question. And secondly, what we're also saying is it's going to cost the town of Clayton a little bit more to do this. And while we can't say it's only this amount for everybody, what we looked at, and from a tax responsibility or share, that depending on their increase, they're going to pay anywhere from $5 to $30 more per month. Now, there may be some outliers in that, but we found that that's a typical spread. And what we're going to get is infrastructure needs in the council's priorities: transportation, public safety, parks and recreation. And the next 10 years, we're going to be moving from that medium size or to small to medium, but still keeping Clayton feeling like home, because we're fixing the things we already have. And we think that's an important message that you all have stated to us. So with that, I have concluded my presentation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions or comments? Mr. Granis?
With respect to Sands Branch Greenway, I believe at one point we were going to be provided a 50-50 match with Campo. And I believe that has recently been changed to where it will be an 80-20 match, Campo 80%, the town 20. And I wanted to be sure that the public is aware of that. And that is something that members of staff and also the representation from council to Campo has worked very hard to accomplish.
Okay, and could I state, just for clarity, that 80/20 means they're going to pay 80% and we
Exactly.
have to only do 20%, which is
And I don't know
tremendous.
what that equates to in terms of dollars, but I know it's very significant.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings to us.
The other thing, and this is speculation on my part, but maybe you can answer it. With the Peyton Street extension, that obviously cuts response time. I would assume that it is possible that private individuals' insurance rates could conceivably be somewhat reduced. Is that fair to say?
Well, I would.
I'm not saying it will be.
I
I'm
would say
saying the
not
possibility is
directly.
open.
If we don't have the response time, that's a negative impact.
Right.
What I would say to you today is we do have that response time, but we're doing that through Archer Lodge. So we're contracting with them to provide that response time for us. So those insurance rates should be set at the level that they will be even after this street. What we're saving is we don't have to pay Archer Lodge anymore. We'll be able to provide that response based on our own mileage ability to get into those neighborhoods.
So I was
Hope that insurance ratings will continue to improve for other reasons, though, and that,
Yeah, but not necessarily for that one.
correct.
The last thing is, and I apologize for not writing all these numbers down when we were going through this budget. Can you approximate how many dollars that we actually cut out of this budget, the council? And then you might also, if you can, share with us what the staff cut out before we ever saw it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to pull that out, right? I don't have those numbers, but I know when we started the process, we were $7 million out of balance staff. By the time we presented a budget to you, we were in balance. Council, of course, went through this budget, and we've been at 3 pretty full meetings going through the budget. Certainly, hundreds of thousands of dollars we've discussed in revenue differences and expenditure changes. So it's been a very difficult budget because I think this council realizes that they're asking the community to accept having to pay more money, and that people don't get a lot of say-so in that, in respect to this budget getting adopted the way it is. And I think you have tasked us and yourselves to communicate why this is important and why this is the vision for Clayton moving forward. And so while we have recognized those costs, we've been very careful trying not to see increases that are above what we would normally expect. And I think this council's been very clear about that, and I think staff's try to be responsive to that. In all the other elements of this budget, I think the increases have been fairly normal with expectations. The large increases are again, mostly based on capital projects, which I think, at least from a communication standpoint, we can tell our community this is what these dollars are going towards: parks, streets, and public safety, which I think are pretty important priorities.
And in your experience, the CIPs that this money would go to would be completed by when?
Well, this is a 5-year capital improvement plan, so we're looking over the next 5 years. However, projects don't always end when they start. So we would expect that these projects will be implemented over the next 7 to possibly 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else? All right. So this is still a public hearing, and if there's anyone who wishes to speak, please step forward and state your name for the record.
Hello again, everybody. Nice to see you again. I'm still out of uniform, but this is my uniform. I'm retired, so.
Nice.
And I felt very out of place this morning when I attended the county budget meeting, because everybody's dressed up there with a jacket and a tie, and I stuck out like a sore thumb. But I told them that I was Merle Haggard speaking for the working man, and I got away with that. But I want to start by just saying that that I have no personal axe to grind in this because I was one of the lucky ones who knew how to fight the revaluation. I found that there were many errors in what was sent out by the county assessment office. And it took me two rounds of appeals, and I finally got it down to the point where I only had a 5% increase, whereas most other people have a 27% increase in the town of Clayton. So this isn't affecting me. I'm not here speaking for myself. I'm speaking for everybody else. And just the two little points that I would like to reiterate at this point is that Mr. Lindsay posed at the beginning one of the important questions that everybody was asking, but he didn't answer it. And I think that's because that answer has to be provided by the council. And that question which wasn't answered, and which I think you folks are going to have to answer, is would you have raised the tax rate had there not been a revaluation in order to fund your capital improvement project? And that kind of depends upon how much money you would willing to raise the tax rate and thereby raise taxes to fund a capital improvement project, which further begs the question of, would you have kept everything in the capital improvement project instead of putting it in piecemeal down the road and not hitting everybody else with the big tax increase this year? And of course, we know from history, once you have an increase of taxes, it never goes back. So we're going to have this increase in taxes resulting from the revaluation every year for the next 8 years. And everybody's going to be paying for that every year. So I would just ask you in your deliberations to consider whether you would have raised the tax rate to fund the CIP had there not been a reevaluation. And if you wouldn't have, then maybe we ought to be thinking about changing the capital improvement project to have less of an impact on people other than myself, because I'm not going to have the impact for the reasons that I stated. But there are a lot of people that money means a lot of money to. And I know you're thinking about them because you always do. And it's been discussed over time, and I would just like to leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I started off, my name is Bob Ellert. I live at 100 Cherry Laurel Drive in Clayton. I started off my comments 2 weeks ago by saying I was disappointed. Now I'm disgusted. You guys are throwing up a lot of smokescreen. It's very simple. You're asking property owners in Clayton to raise their taxes 16%. I think you've got too much in the CIP program. You need to take some of it out. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I think some of you have seen or heard of me a little bit from somebody too. And my little comments I'm going to say is simple, but that expense, and I'll say some of my little extra major expenses is part of it because of all the good things that I've seen that plan to take place. Did I tell you who I was yet? I talked about it a little bit, so forgive me. I am a Woodrow Mitchell fella, lives over off of 42 West, and that's on Vandora Springs area. But anyway, no, it's not either. But you know where I live, I'd say too. But back to the main, I guess, point is the good news and the good things I'll say is good. It does seem, though, me being, I'll say, on 42 West area, there's not as much as planned than 42 East. It does seem like there's a whole lot more being provided there and all the extra nicer things to do. And the sadness is 42 West and downtown areas the expense going up. So I do have concern with what was shared there as far as the cost of the other folks here in the town. And I've been here about 6 years now, and I chose, rather than Garner Raleigh, coming here too. But the big thought that I'm having a hard time with is the increase in the, that word that we refer to as the water and the sewage, that percentage of being an increase of, 9% for the expense of using the water and the sewage and, of course, the garbage pickup. Why is that necessary to increase in the cost of having that service provided? Just have a hard time with that as understanding why is that needed to be done too. So that's the big issue really that I do question. Why is that necessary to raise for some of the things again that's been shared? And I say thank you folks too.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Town Council. First, I want to say God bless you and thank you for what you do. My name is James Lipscomb, 328 East Main Street, Clayton. I had the pleasure of sitting up there through 10 budget cycles, so I understand what you're going through. And we need the quality of life stuff that you guys are proposing. So I'm not up here speaking as much against the potential tax increases as I am just saying that I want you to be as efficient as possible. I want you to hold staff being as efficient as possible. I think sometimes that's stuff that's overlooked. The quality of life, if we don't worry about those things now, we let it get too far away from us, it's going to be even harder to pull it back in. So we've got to worry about quality of life. We've got to worry about roads. When I ride up and down the roads and I say, oh my gosh, you know, this has got to be fixed. And I know it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars per mile to go in and do these things. So I applaud you for that. I say God bless you. One thing that I want to talk about from my business side is the rec fees. What you're talking about going up on rec fees if it's on a open space subdivision. It's basically $375 now per lot rec fee. You're talking about you want to jump into $2,000 in less than 18 months. And that's on all projects, in the way I understand it, even projects that we're currently working on. I know we had budgeted for the $375 because there's been stuff to where we had anticipated the $375 fee and we'd put a lot of extra amenities in the subdivision, you know, walking trails and other things that cost a lot of money to do. And now we're facing the potential negative impact of these fees being increased. And again, I'm not against Parks and Recreation. I believe in Parks and Recreation. I want to support them, but I really appreciate it if you'd give us the opportunity to bring those fees in over a longer period of time, especially for projects that have already been approved. So it's very punitive on us to try to be able to absorb that type of increase over a short period of time. So again, God bless you. Thank you for what you do.
Sure. Thank you. Anyone else?
Reed Smith, 114 West Main Street. Like James, I would like a little clarification on the Parks and Rec part of the budget, and that what grandfathering or process there would be on communities that are in place or have already been approved, and how that phasing in would be treated, and to make sure that the council knows as well.
Yeah, that's actually next on the agenda. Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, no one else wishing to speak. I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the council for their discussion. Mr. Sadler.
I'd like to be first because I know Michael's going to be longer.
I don't have anything to say.
You lie. To answer your question, been in this town 61 years. I love this town. Don't ever plan on going anywhere. I love this town. You can't hear me, I'll get a little closer for you. Your question was, would we raise the taxes 9 cents? For what we're trying to do for the town of Clayton and its citizens, yes, we would. Bob, you can remember the year we rose 9 cents at one time. 9 cents. 9 cents. I would do it again. I feel like we're doing this for the citizens and the town. We are not a sleepy little small town anymore. We're going into a middle-sized town, and it costs a lot of money. And I don't like my taxes going up either. Property value is going up, though.
Mr. Holder.
This is my 10th or 11th budget, and it's been the hardest one that I've sat through. The easiest one was when we had the recession, because then we cut. We got through the recession with our reserves staying where they were supposed to. Your question was, would I have voted to increase taxes without the reevaluation? It had been discussed before the reevaluation. Everything this town needs. I didn't say wants. I said everything this town needs to get us to where we wanted to be. We've ignored some of the things during the past 10 years I've been on the council. Yes, I would have voted to increase taxes.
So I, along with Art, agree this has been without a doubt the most difficult budget during my tenure on this council. And as we've said publicly many, many times over the last fiscal year, we're growing from a small town to a medium-sized town. And with this growth comes a lot of challenges, not the least of which is our financial standing point. And over the years, this town has absorbed several rates from the likes of the county, the likes of electricities, the likes of others. And we've chosen on many, many occasions to not pass that increase along. Sometimes we have, but not always. Probably the most compelling thing for me is that based on what Davenport and Company has told us with respect to their financial analyses, is if we are not to increase at all, there would be no bond, which means there would be nothing that we have mentioned to you in the CIPs that we could do. And that would be yet another several years before we could even begin to consider doing CIPs. We've already waited, in many cases, as long as 10 years, in a few cases even longer. And I think we're in the position to finally be able to do something to create the improvements that I personally think are sorely needed in our community, especially with our parks, especially with our streets. And I think part of the reason that we are able to come to you tonight with such a bond rating is because of being fiscally responsible probably ever since back to 1998 or maybe even 1997. All the councils before us have done a great job, and I'm going to include this council, being very frugal with the funds. And believe me, that I think we do have the best interest of all our citizens. And I know it's going to be tough on some. I'll even use myself as an example. I'm going to have to talk to you after this meeting. My assessment went up 122%. I challenged it, appealed it. It's currently sitting at 63%. Don't know that it'll go down. That's a heck of a lot more than somewhere between the 17 and 22% the vast majority of our citizens are going to experience. You know, I've talked to 82 people in this town, in the town limits. A simple majority of them, let me rephrase that. A substantial minority of them are opposed to us doing an increase, but there is a simple majority that seems to be okay with that. Ironically for me, you're never going to get 100%. I was surprised that I got as close as I got to 50-50. I've spent over 75 hours specifically on this budget. I've asked over 235 questions of staff. They don't want to hear from me again.
It's a low number, Mr. Dennis.
But the reason I share that is because I care, and I know every person on this board cares. We're concerned about the increase. But at the end of the day, and I can only speak for myself, I truly believe in my heart that it is really both in the citizens and the town's best interest to leave this tax rate where it is and to begin the process of increasing the service rates that I previously mentioned. Tough decision, but if we do take a vote tonight, I will be voting in the affirmative.
Anyone else? Mr. Bunn?
You know, there's not a whole lot more I can add to that, but I would like to say that this is my second cycle for the budget. First one, we raised it 3 pennies. And the reason I voted for those 3 pennies, I've lived here for 57 years, and I've sat out in that audience for 4 or 5 years before I got up here. I kept wanting the streets to improve. Never did. And you heard Mr. Lindsay say tonight that we've gone from $500,000 to over $1 million for street improvements. That's why I voted for that 3 penny increase last year. This year was probably the hardest, but one of the best times that we had to work on this budget. We spent hours and hours and hours cutting, questioning, cutting, questioning, and cutting this budget. But everybody, you know, we sit here like, well, we need to lower it. Well, we could lower it. But then you'll be sitting out there next week going, well, the road's getting any better. You hear people say, why don't we have a Chick-fil-A, Dave? You hear people say that all the time. Why don't we have a Chick-fil-A? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? It's simple, because we've been kicking the can down the road so many years, putting things off for the next 2 years before we could do another CIP or whatever. But it's time for us to take that final step. And if I vote tonight, I would have to say I would vote for it also. Tonight's the night that I would vote to improve, to carry Clayton to the next level. That's just how I feel.
Anyone else? Mr. Thompson?
Well, I a lot of times take the unpopular opinion of disagreeing with the others that sit beside me. And I think this is still one of those times. I still think there's a lot of work to be done with regard to want versus need. I still see a lot of want in the budget versus need. I think we got some fat that we could trim. And I also feel like we could do something. No, I don't think we need to go back revenue neutral, but I feel like we could go somewhere to a midpoint and still accomplish a lot of the things that we want to do. I worry about those that are on fixed incomes that, you know, can't afford to see a $30 increase in their bill a month. You know, that's a substantial amount of money for a lot of people. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I feel like this has been a very good process. There has been, I can't dispute anything these fellows have said. There's been so much work that's gone into this, from the staff level to our, you know, this is the most we've ever met on a budget. That is for sure. I'm not satisfied that we've cut enough.
Thank you, sir. So they say that the wisest man in the room always speaks last, and I can assure you that's not the case tonight. But I do want to just put a few thoughts out there. We have, in the 16 years that I have been the mayor of the town of Clayton, we have raised taxes. And every time we have raised taxes, we have certainly put out there to the public what that increase was for specifically. It's never been to send us all on a nice vacation or anything frivolous. It's always been to meet the demand of what Clayton needed. And we have a bit of a reputation in Clayton too, you know. Your mayor particularly has been labeled a tax and spend mayor. But your mayor has a reputation to uphold too, because, you know, all of that investment, all of that taxing has yielded us the award of the best place to live and send your kids to school and invest and work in this town of Clayton. That mentality has also yielded us the best quality of life in a region, which also yielded us over a $2 billion expansion of Novo Nordisk. We celebrated that with a tour last week, and the man in charge of Novo from Denmark said, the reason we chose Clayton is because of your close relationship we have with local government, because of your vision and because of your financial responsibility to your citizens, because they look to see how well you're taking care of your citizens before they're going to come see how well you're going to take care of somebody worth $4 billion. Everything is expensive. 16 years ago, when I got into this, when we had a bond referendum for parkland and land banking, you got your money's worth. You know, 16 years later, you don't get what you used to get for your money. And when it comes to this group, we're trying to make sure Clayton's getting all it can for every penny. So it's never easy. And this particular budget has probably been the hardest. I think the council has already stated that. This is one of those times where the line item by line item method went into play. And we haven't done that in Clayton since before Bob Ehlert came in and got Clayton on the right track with a 9-cent increase in taxes, which was needed and warranted and nobody complained about, and look what happened. Would I have raised taxes if the reevaluation had not taken place? It depends. It depends on what the story would have been. We need this for this. If that's logical, if that aligns with my vision as a leader for the town of Clayton, then I would have voted in favor of it. Because we don't have a reputation in Clayton of taxing for no reason. We're always telling why we're having this increase and what we're doing. You know, I worry about the cost of living in Clayton, and in particularly like people like my mom and Bobby's mom and those folks who have been in Clayton for over 65 years, paying taxes, paying for growth, paying the way so that all of us can enjoy what we do in the town of Clayton today. But the fact of the matter remains, Clayton is as affordable today as it's ever going to be. You know, when you're not even breaking even on your wastewater treatment, that's an issue. That means it's been too inexpensive for too long. Because while we're not here to make a bunch of money and bank a bunch of money, we are here to make sure that we're good stewards of what we do and that level and quality of service always remains stellar. Just this past week, I received an email that said today's current population in Clayton, North Carolina is 22,850 people, 41% from 10 years ago. Where's it going to be in 10 years? And if we don't take action today, what is it going to be in 10 years? How much more is it going to cost the citizens of Clayton in 10 years? So I'm proud of our town council for all the hard work that you've done. And I'm in agreement with Jason. We could probably battle this thing out for another 4 months and trim. But the fact of the matter is, we really are going from that small town to that mid-sized town, and this is a growing pain. You know, and I don't like paying taxes either, but I like seeing where my tax money is being spent. And I think that's the appreciation to the citizens of the town of Clayton. So thank you. Mr. Satfield.
All that being said, just so I can be the one to make the motion on this, let everybody know how much I believe in this year's budget, and y'all will too, you'll see it. I make the motion that we approve fiscal year 2019, 2020 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Up next on the agenda is the 2019-86OA Recreation Open Space Credits.
Good evening, Samantha Woolen-Weber, Planning Director. The ordinance amendment before you tonight is a request to eliminate the 50% credit for recreation fees for new subdivisions. This is found in Chapter 155, Article 2. It is under the recreation and open space requirements. Currently, a 50% credit is offered to developers or applicants of subdivisions who provide open space. There is also, so let me try to explain. A lot of people think that you pay the fees so you get the higher density. There's actually two separate issues involved here. You are allowed to cluster and have the higher density because you provide open space. When you have very small lot sizes, general statutes allow you to require this open space so that people have places to recreate. As you know, that we approve a lot of planned developments with some smaller lot sizes compared to our conventional subdivision standards. So that's the issue. If you want higher density, and a lot of them do, you provide more units on a piece of land, then that is the reason you get the higher densities, because you provide that open space, places for people to recreate. And a lot of times it is land that is not developable. So again, this kind of goes into the in-depth, and I do want to clarify that this is not for the fee. The fee is adopted with the budget. This is just for the ordinance amendment, removing the 50% credit. So right now, if somebody comes in and they provide the correct amount of open space on an open space subdivision or planned development, they would get 50% off of their rec fees, which at this time, as of today, is $750. So they would pay $375. This would eliminate that, and they would pay the full amount. This is similar to what other jurisdictions do as well. Some provide credit, some do not. But with that being said, we still left in the ordinance that if the town of Clayton Town Council decides to accept land for the public purpose, for a public park, and you all accept it, then they get 100% of the fee is waived. So there still is a clause in there that the council can't accept land as a public land, and they won't have to pay the recreation fee at all. So that discretion is still in there and left up to the council. And this fee is used to meet the demand for additional recreation facilities. Right now, we just ran some numbers today. We have 6,584 houses that are entitled, I should say units, because some of those are multifamily, that are not built yet. So 7,000 units, and we have another approximately 600 coming through. So we're looking at close to 7,000 units entitled and not built by the end of the summer. Some numbers that were also ran is that it's approximately $6,000 per household for our recreation facilities, and we are currently charging $375. And the fees have also not been raised in at least 20 years. But again, this is not about the fee, but this is about removing the 50% credit, but I just kind of wanted to give it a background of how we got to this. And with the fee adoption in the budget, there was a phased approach. It would be $1,000 July 1st, $1,500 on January 1st, and $2,000 next July. And we also did a recommendation of the planning board. They did adopt the version as before you tonight, but there was discussion about some sort of grandfathering, and we looked at several different options, but there's not a feasible way to do that that would be manageable. We did discuss maybe prolonging the phasing in of the total amount. So As far as the ordinance, right, it is the original one that was presented, and it was approved by planning board, and staff also recommends approval. And our attorneys have reviewed this ordinance.
Questions or comments? Mr. Grass?
Did I hear you correctly to say that if property in a development is used for parks or public recreation and the town approves that, that then 100% credit is given?
If the town council accepts the land, so it would be the town of Clayton's land, the town of Clayton's park, it would not be a private subdivision amenity. So say they have a big, large tract of land somewhere and it abuts one of our parks, and it might make great sense to add to our park facility, and it might be one of those trade-offs between the development and improving or expanding that park. That may not be the case a lot of times. It just depends on where the new development is.
And I'm assuming that that's currently a statement, something like that, or verbatim, whichever, is in Title 15, Chapter 155?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The reason I question that is I didn't see any reference to it in the ordinance amendment.
And that actually, the 100% credit has always been in there.
In
the
the
ordinance.
chapter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Mr. Grandis, just to make sure it's clear, with the dedication of parkland, if the council accepts it, it becomes the land owned by town of Clayton. It's
Right.
dedicated. And that's the difference of accepting.
And then the developer would get credit for whatever amount they've paid. Okay.
And I know Scott is here. He did some research and talked to a bunch of different recreation departments about their fees and the same credit. So we've worked very closely with the recreation department on this amendment.
Mr. Holder?
Maybe I missed something, but I thought I understood that that land would become town of Clayton's.
If it is accepted by the town council, yes, sir. But the regular open space and other like little tot lots and playgrounds, pools and subdivisions, that's not the town of Clayton's land. That is their private amenities. And a lot of these subdivisions, because we get calls and they say, well, there's people here on our amenities and they don't live here. Well, that's something the HOA would enforce. But a lot of people don't want, it's kind of like their private space. But the credit is only if you all accept it.
But then it becomes our responsibility.
Right, we're not suggesting a change to that, but you've always had that ability to do that, is what we're saying. But the council doesn't usually ever accept those things. Like if a developer came and said, we want you to have our pool or our golf course, normally you would say no. I mean, that's typically what you do. And we haven't, as a pattern, we haven't done that in town.
How can you budget for it?
So just to make sure it's clear, the ordinance amendment that's before you all doesn't impact your discretion to accept or not to accept land. That's not on the table. You can accept it, you cannot accept it. If you accept it, there's 100% credit to the fee, whatever that fee might be. It's always been that way. The amendment on the table tonight takes away a 50% reduction in the fee based on density. I think that's what Samantha's trying to, I'm doing this right, to clarify is this amendment is about density and tying it to a credit to the fee,
Well,
not about the 100% and whether or not you're going to accept land.
yes, so it's removing the 50% credit, but you provide open space because you're allowed a higher density. But a lot of people think that they get the higher density because they pay the fee. That is not correct. They're two different issues there. This ordinance amendment is only to remove the 50% credit towards the fee. No matter if you provide 200 acres of open space or if you want the higher density, you provide the open space.
Any other questions for staff? All right. If not, I'll open the floor for public comment. It's been notarized noted as a public hearing. I'll now open the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak, please step forward and state your name for the record.
James Lipscomb, 328 East Main Street, Clayton, NC. Mr. Mayor, Town Council, I do not disagree with staff on this. I supported this the other night at the planning board level. My major concern is how this affects currently approved projects. Also, in the future, as a developer, I feel like going to probably be asked to look at stuff earlier as saying, would you accept this as a dedication before you go through all the entitlement process and all the expense of the entitlement process, and then get to the end and say, okay, we just designed this assuming that the council may want to take it, and now the council didn't, and this is a huge hit financially. So there's going to be some learning curves, I believe, involved with this. And again, I want to say I'm pro-recreation. I'm not sitting here speaking against all the fee increases, but I am extremely concerned on how this is budgeted. And I want you guys to think about how you would feel and how the town manager would feel if the state of North Carolina had some unfunded mandates that they laid down on you guys this year that would really make you do a lot of soul searching and having to cut in other places because of that unfunded mandate. And that's kind of what you're putting on the development community. And some of the projects I know that are languishing because of, can they afford to do it and what the costs are, this is going to be, this could be, a death blow for some of these ones that haven't started yet that we were expecting to start earlier. So, thank you.
So how does this affect what's already been approved?
So this fee is paid at the time of platting. So anytime that someone comes in for a final plat, this is not at the approval level, this is when they come in for a plat. And a lot of times that could be up to a year or two after their approval by you all due to construction drawings, putting in infrastructure, and then getting their final plats, their Mylars ready. So that is generally when that's when it's paid, along with the system development fees. So anything that's not platted, as of the ordinance goes into effect tonight, we did not make it July 1st. So it would be moving forward, but they would pay the way the fee schedule is set up. We set it up to a phased approach so that they would have time to get their plats in, and they would have a year to adjust up to the full fee. So, okay, we try to break it down by the number of, like I said, we have 6,500 housing units approved but not yet built. And right now, I'm not sure how many final plats we have in. But we said, well, maybe we can do it by how many people have approved construction documents. But that would be something, it's very hard to manage and even to get correct without just doing a set, remove the fee, remove the credit, and then they pay whatever the fee is at the time when the plat comes in. Does that make sense?
So
There's mud.
So everything's platted, the fee's already been paid.
Yes, if it's already been platted, they've already paid their fee.
You're saying there's 6,500 approvals already, just haven't been platted, right?
Correct. Or not built. Some of those may have been platted. That's the catch-22. Some of those may have been platted but not built yet. But those are the ones we still have to update our CO numbers. I mean, it's very complicated in the way we have to figure out how this goes. It's actually a lot of manual work. There's not a technology way to do it. So some of those may be already platted, but majority of those are just entitled.
So you're looking at it going into effect July 1st, our calendar year, if we make a recommendation tonight, or change it?
I would have to see what budget ordinance was adopted.
But if you recall, when we developed the budget and the fee schedule, council did indicate that you wanted a phased approach to this. And I think that's in line with what Mr. Lipscomb is seeking. I think what Samantha is articulating is that we need to figure out what that phased approach could be. What it is right now, as your adopted budget would state, is effective July 1 at plat, that you're going to pay $1,000 for every unit. Okay, for every unit. Then effective January 1, you're then going to pay $1,500 for every lot at plat. And then in July 1, 2020, you're going to pay $2,000 per plat per unit. That was the phased approach. What I think Mr. Lipscomb is requesting is relief on that. And what staff is saying that in the absence of a grandfather, if you wanted to spread that out further, that would be at least an easier way for us to manage it. I can't say what makes the most sense without sort of looking and talking to Mr. Lipscomb and others in the process, but the idea could be you could spread the phasing out even further if you wanted to, and that's something staff could consider and bring back to you at the next meeting for consideration.
Well, it makes, for me, it makes it harder for me to want to expand it out further when we get information that our recreation costs $6,000 a house. How long are we gonna put it off? We're going in the hole.
That is your consideration.
Mr. Grant.
Is, to figure out how to form this question. Is there a statute of limitations on, from the time that the council approves a project until all lots have to be platted? Or any lots?
There is some language in our code that states how that a subdivision up to a certain number of lots should be completely platted by a certain number of years, and then the next size is in future years. I can honestly say that we've always worked with the developers, and as long as they are getting towards that end goal, we've never fully enforced that, because sometimes things happen, and I don't know if that was come out of the recession of '08 and that you had all these subdivisions and streets on the ground and nothing was happening. But generally, it does move pretty quickly as once the subdivision is approved and they start and they go throughout their phases. But technically, yes, sir, there is something in there, but we like to work with developers.
Well, I think the important thing too is that we're not voting tonight, if we vote at all tonight. We're not voting on the new amounts and when they take place. We're only saying that the 50% goes away effective July 1, and then the 375 then becomes 750. Is that correct?
If that is, yes.
No, you've already adopted a budget with that fee schedule in it, but you can decide what you want your fees to be. I mean, that you do that as part of a budget every year. And right now, you have said 1,000 July 1, 1,500 January 1, 2,000 next July. But it's you can decide what you want that fee to be next meeting. You can change that, and we felt like you all wanted to discuss that and why we didn't put an action item on this particular agenda item, because we felt like you wanted to discuss that. I mean, you could make the fee $750 on July 1 and $1,000 October 1 and $1,250 on January 1. I mean, you could step it up in any way you want. And to Bob Satterfield's point, you know, how far out do you want to spread that? That's certainly a decision you can make. Now, the reality is those dollars aren't balancing your budget. They're a recreation fee that's set aside that's going to help pay for some of that capital plan. But you all can decide sort of how quickly and how high you want to go. But as you've adopted the budget, you've said that it's going to be 2,000 by next July.
If I may, Bob, you made a comment about each lot today is costing how much for Parks and Rec?
That was what we got the report on all. Recreation-wise, cost $6,000.
Can you speak to how that was determined?
I believe, Nancy, they added the total number of houses up, and then they divided that by our assets at the park.
Thank you.
I apologize, I'm not feeling well, otherwise I wouldn't have sat there and talked for
sorry
so
I got
long
you
before I realized. We took the total number of residential parcels in town, developed and non-developed. So we took into account all residential parcels that are available for building, even whether they have a house or not. Then we took the total value of our Parks and Recreation system, our parks, our trails, community center, and came up with a per parcel value to fund the recreation system. And it was around $6,000 per parcel.
Okay. That's good, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So do y'all want to have some more time to get some input from everybody before you
I would
take
like
any
to.
action on this? And let's just go ahead and table this discussion until the June 17th.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I want to ask a question before you move on.
Reed Smith, 114 West Main Street. I'm confused. When I came up during the budget time to ask about the fee and the fee schedule, I think it was said that would be discussed next. But then I think hearing from staff, y'all approved that during the budget time, and I was not able to address that. Is that what happened?
Yeah, and if I could clarify, Reed, I think the budget is adopted, but the intent on this item and why it doesn't have an action as we anticipate they wanted to discuss that, and we can change that fee schedule the next meeting, and so we want to know what the council's input is on that. But I didn't want them to think that if they don't do anything, that something hasn't happened. I mean, they did set the fees, but we know they wanted to discuss it, and we expected by our next meeting, we'd have clear direction on what they want to do.
Well, I think that's something y'all really need to think about on projects that have been approved. I mean, we do business a certain way, and when we plan on communities and certain things, we do that with that information. And if you take a project like the Barber tract that we brought before you just a few months ago and are trying like heck to get it built and platted out by before Christmas with only 30 days notice, we're not even gonna get 30 days notice on this fee. It has this proposed. That project could take $100,000 hit in less than 6 months. And I'm just not sure that's how the town of Clayton should do business. And clearly projects that have been approved for 8 to 10 years, that they've had time to develop their neighborhoods, but ones that we've brought and are developing on a reasonable schedule, I think that should be given some serious consideration as we committed and planned out our amenities in that section, you know, did the whole nine. For example, in Parkview, the amenities we put in Parkview, we're about to record our last phase. If we don't hurry up and get it in, we've got to pay this fee. And we're building part of the Sam's Branch Greenway. So I'd really caution you. I mean, somebody brings in a new neighborhood next month, they can pay the $2,000 that month. That's fine. They knew what they were doing when they came to the show. But those that have brought theirs through, I think, should be playing by a different set of rules until they have a chance to reasonably develop their neighborhood.
The $100,000 hit you talking about, is that on like a 3 or 5 year build out where you will be paying $2,000 on the last phases of that?
That's right, on 130 lots.
Right. How big of a build out?
We're have phase one that we just got town comments back on roughly 70 lots, a little over half the project that we're trying to plat out by the end of the year.
So you're gonna look at it, what, 2.5
2 to 3 phases.
Okay.
And on another note, I mean, y'all need to know to record a lot in this town now is going to cost over $7,000 a lot cash up front before we can even liquidate a lot. That means that on a 50 lot phase, I've got to write a $350,000 check to record that phase before I can liquidate the first lot.
I do believe there should be some consideration, especially for your trail that you put in. So that needs to be discussed.
Which I think staff has addressed in the phasing of it. I'm more concerned on just the grandfathering in and the recordation fees. If there was any other thought I could give council is that they not be paid at recordation of plat. If there was another trigger where they could be paid either at building permit or some way, but I mean, again, it's just a lot of money to record a plat. And it's easy once you sell the lot, once you liquidate the lot, then you can pay fees out of a liquidated lot. We went through the system and impact development fee, and it was deemed that that was statute, and we had to do it that way. I do not believe this is statute. I believe there is some discretion here in when this fee can be collected.
That's something we need to discuss, and thank you.
So what I would like to ask, and I think Reed and James will agree, that if it gives staff the expectation to research this and maybe come back with some different scenarios and options for how we could phase differently, if we can do the grandfathering kind of approach. Again, can we manage that legally? Can we do it? Those are questions that we want to answer for sure before we propose to you, well, what we think will work. But it's always been council's direction and staff's intent to do a phasing of this, and I think we're just still trying to find that balance.
Well, Michael and I met with you last week. Is there a chance that possibly next Monday we can meet again if you're free?
What about tomorrow?
Well,
I don't think there's that great a sense of urgency.
No, I'm just saying, they might give them a little more time to brainstorm and some options and all that stuff.
Yeah, I certainly deserves further discussion. There's no
We
doubt
don't
about
have, I mean, it'll be next week before, when we have to get this on the agenda, so it comes back around really quick. So it'll be this week or next before and we'll have that follow-up with you.
Maybe we could get together maybe Monday, and
How about Friday?
good luck.
Because I'm sure you'll be here if we need you, won't you, Mr. Satterfield?
You
For
got
the
a phone,
record,
right?
that's a yes.
You got a phone, right?
I'd like to just check with staff and our schedule, but we'll certainly circle back around.
Mr. Holder?
I want to remind the town and the council, we've heard a lot of fees being increased in the last 6 months. And if we're not careful, we're going to price ourselves out of the market development.
I had a thought. What if we do it at the CO? Could we manage it then?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it to be able to determine that. That's why I'm relying on my professional staff to bring me something
That's
back.
something to discuss, though.
Well, no doubt, but I'm just saying, I'm
It's
not
an
here to be
option.
able to decide how that would, be shooting in the dark.
We will come back with options and lots more research on this for you.
And I want to see what best practices are in other areas. So I don't, if everybody else is saying cough it up or forget it, I want to know it. If other areas say you can have 3 different times a year you can pay on this, I want to know it. I want to know what the best practices are.
Just because if they all say cough it up now or else, doesn't mean we have to do it.
Well, certainly not, because we just spent $8,000 to have a street monitored when we heard from a 25-year traffic engineer that is not a best practice. So we already have, a precedent set on, we don't have to go with what the best practice is or not. All right, anything else? So do I entertain a motion to continue this till June 17th?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Up next is the Advanced Metering Infrastructure AMI project update.
Good evening, Council and Game Utilities and Billing. I'm here just to introduce Andy Honeycutt, who's with MeterSys. This project has been in the works and involved a lot of staff. It touches pretty much every department in the town to, in some way. Andy's going to update us on where we're at in the project, and then Robert's going to speak to us a little bit about the financing.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. My name is Andy Honeycutt with MeterSys. It's great to be with you this evening. In the continuing theme about money and capital investment, we want to talk about your water infrastructure, your electric infrastructure, and specifically how we advance technology for the town of Clayton. The team has put together quite a due diligence period for this project. Back in September of 2017, we started with a process of business case evaluation, evaluating the feasibility of looking either at a retrofit of your meter infrastructure or even a full change out. And that committee was comprised of leadership, electric utility, water utility, utility billing, development, finance. And the groups obligation was to task our company with evaluating the business case. And our company does, this is all we do. So MeterSys stands for Meter Systems. We recognized many years ago there was a gap in the industry when it came to meter technology. It was, you bought the equipment from distributors, you put that equipment in and hope you made the right investment. In this particular case, we serve as an advocate for the town. We do not sell products. We do not sell specific services aligned with vendors. We're completely neutral to the solution. I'm a former municipal manager, and so we act in very focused regard for the interest of the community. And so I think it's important to know that we come to the town with a position of neutrality. And so when we evaluate solutions, it's done so on the merits of its own offering. So Adam and Ann and Byron and others, Nancy, all did a fantastic job, and they suffered through many meetings. We had a lot of due diligence to get us to where we are. I think in your previous retreat, you had a financial review of our business case analysis, and that predicated the procurement of your solution. And so we spent the next several months in working through developing the RFP and sending out the specifications and getting to that solution selection. So we started and presented the feasibility study in February of 2018. We kicked off procurement in July of last year. We did best and final bid review selection in May. And then we have been working through final contract negotiation ahead of your authorization. And so here we are tonight, giving you a bit about what we're recommending, and then Robert will talk more about the LGC's recommendations. I do want to mention on the front end, just very quickly, the board may understand this, and I know you do, but for members of the public, we'll use two terms, AMR and AMI. AMR stands for automated meter reading, and that's essentially what you have now. You drive by your electric and water accounts every month, and you capture a reading at that point in time. One reading per 30 months. And in the term of AMI, Advanced Meter Infrastructure, we create a network where meter data is collected 720 times per month. That gives us a lot more information, a lot more analytics, and provides us with alerts and alarms capacity that we can improve customer service. And so when we talk about AMR and AMI, those are the terms that reflect those functions. And so the objectives of the project were to improve customer service, number one, and really establish that self-service potential for your customers, both on the electric and water side. You also have end-of-life assets, meaning assets that have been in the ground, they have served their useful life, and the town has been changing those out over time. And it is important. We're talking about an investment much like your CIP project that you talked about earlier, but in this case, it's assets you don't see but are extraordinarily important on the water side to performance. It is your cash register of the utility, and we want to make sure those assets are operating effectively. We want to optimize utility revenue through more accurate usage. So in the case of water, as mechanical meters age and become end-of-life assets, they slow down. And so you will end up measuring up to, on an average, 5% less than the customer actually is using. And certainly in the operation of an enterprise fund, you want to capture the revenues you're supposed to capture. Then we want to get into things like leak detection, improved outage management on the electric side, customer alerts and distribution data. And that all helps us in automating data that's coming in and helping us respond better to utility operations. And last but not least, we want to improve efficiency of the organization. So we want to do things like remote disconnect. Rather than rolling a truck every time we have a disconnect order, we actually can, on the electric side, do that from the office in an automated environment. And you can also do it on the water side for water-only customers with the investment of additional infrastructure. We want to profile usage data. So if a customer says they didn't feel like they used a certain amount of water or electricity, we can profile that on an hourly basis and help that customer understand their usage profiles. And then get data back on theft, tampering, a failed to read environment. And so we're proving that the knowledge and the ability of the staff to respond. So currently, you have converted some of your meters over to AMR, all of your electric and most of your water. And what you're doing is operating in a hybrid system. So you've auto-read a portion of your system, and you're still manually reading others. And what that creates is this dual business process. And that essentially creates less than efficient operation. Because for every house that's been converted, you go to a next house or a next neighborhood that you have to get out of the truck and key in the reads and create this manual process. What that manual process does is create about 170 reread requirements per month. So that's another truck roll to grab that read. You have a failure rate of about 15% each month just because of the asset stop operation. There are 400 accounts on average on the cut list every month, of which, because of staff and resource limitations, you're able to execute about 160 of those. And of those balances that do not, it does require Ann's group to engage the customer through notification, reminders, and encouragement to pay that bill and get that service, or pay the bill before service is discontinued. Between 2015 and 2017, there were 570 stopped meters. That's just assets that were failed and had to be replaced, and 265 electric meters. So the end-of-life asset you're experiencing on the electric side as well. And you're doing 1,120 meter changeouts, and these are just staff time, scheduling that, going into the field and buying that equipment. And you see that the disparity in cycles 2, 3, and 4 create a real compression of schedule for the staff and constrains the organization. You have a 4% growth rate in your utility, and so new meter sets are required, and that requires more customers signing on to the program. So you have 9,296 water accounts and 6,912 electric accounts. So the town of Clayton serves 16,208, and that number is growing each year of customers that pay into the utility operation. Now, I mentioned the feasibility study that we did about a year ago, and the financial metrics from that were we estimated certain capital costs and certain payback. Now, the difference between this project and maybe some of the other CIP projects that you talk about, where it's all investment or all expenditure, meter technology actually has a return on investment, meaning you execute the capital investment, and it actually brings back in revenue through proper registration. It lowers operational cost, and it defers those expenditures that you're using or budgeting every year for meter replacement. So if we bake all that in, it does give you a return on investment. And we anticipate that the hard cost benefits, the cash benefits, plus the soft cost efficiencies in staff time gives you a payback of about 8 years. And those numbers are conservative, and those numbers are modeled, and they have gone through quite the scrutiny from the project team. And we feel very good that the inputs follow good methodology. So there were 4 bids that came in for the town of Clayton, and they're all viable solutions. Ferguson is the distributor for Census. United Systems is the distributor for Itron. Panelist, and Itron's your legacy electric meter, so that's a name that everyone knows. Panelist, which does an Itron solution as a reseller or a solution provider, and then Aclara. And so through due diligence, the committee selected 2 of those for further review in a shortlist environment, that being Ferguson Census and Itron. And further negotiations were conducted with these groups, and you see the cost summary before you. And we're pleased to announce that the cost estimates are very close in alignment with our estimates for feasibility. So there was not an under assumption by capital in the planning phase that didn't prove out in the market. And so even with contingency, we're coming in on the final right at 4.4 million, and then you would want to add some additional cost in for program management and other things. And so at the end of the day, you have a provider that is recommended, and that is Ferguson and Census. Census is based in Raleigh. We're also based in Raleigh. This is a very strong market for clean tech industries, and Census is one of the industry's leaders in both the water and electric environment. So they're well known and well validated. Just as a overall capital comparison, you see the summary between Ferguson Census and Itron, and on the recommended solution, including some reserve for remote water disconnect metering, we get to about $4.7 million, $4,750,000 full meter replacement and full program cost. One of the line items you see there is what we would believe and advocate, and while it sounds self-serving, we, as a former municipal manager and a professional in the metering environment, we highly recommend program management through a firm that is dedicated to that. And obviously that's something that we do, and I'll break out what that role is in just a second. We also use objective terms in terms of evaluating the solution. And you see that Ferguson Waterworks ranked highest in all of the different elements that we used, and it was a very methodical process of ranking based on a number of attributes we put in the request for proposals, and it gets us to the score you see on this chart. All right, so I mentioned program management. This is not a meter replacement process. It is more of a technology play by the town of Clayton. We're talking about installing a network. We're doing billing interfaces. We are going to install highly technical meters that have to talk on that network in a very high-performing environment. We have to do training for those new systems. It does involve a customer portal where the customer actually will be able to get on and see their consumption profiling at any point and execute a bill payment should they choose. And so there's a number of things that create a technically complex environment for this project. And so part of what we do is setting up that project and being a resource and an advocate and a team member with the town staff so that we execute the project flawlessly. And our company has done that many times across North Carolina and even out west. And we know this business pretty well, and we do it. This is all we do. So we would set up the project, activate it, engage the team, engage the vendor. We would work with your utility billing vendor on systems integration. We would make sure that the network is installed correctly and tested. We'd test everything from end to end for the solution and issue the full deployment. And that's going to take somewhere between 18 and 24 months. So that seems like a long period of time, but there's a lot of activity that has to happen. We touch every single account, every single meter. Everything is replaced. I mentioned on the front end, we talked about retrofitting maybe some of the meters that could be retrofitted, but we were able to create through negotiation and good planning, I think, the ability to convert all of your infrastructure at one time and have that as a solution moving forward. The other good news about a full system conversion, as you know, the predicted useful life, you can plan for that through CIP allocation because you're replacing all of your assets at one time. There's not this rolling end-of-life environment. So in 15 years, you've got that runway to understand a capital reserve or capital set aside, getting us to that next project stage. We have our project team here for your information and how certain programs are allocated or milestones are allocated throughout the project. And then you see moving forward how we anticipate, should the board agree to support, how we would execute, seeking local government commission approval on June 4th. No, excuse me, June 4th. June 4th, board authorization possibly as early as 6/17, project initiation on 7/9, and then completing by 6/30 of 2021. So with that, I know that there's a lot of material to cover in a short period of time, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Mr. Bunn?
So have we put any of these meters in yet?
No,
We've
sir.
not.
No, sir.
So what's the new charges that we're hitting our light bills with this past week with meter readings?
You're seeing the fee increase. This was a project that was approved last budget, and the cost for the debt, which is what those numbers where you saw that we'll say $4.7 million. That's a borrow. That's why we're going to the local government commission. And so we're beginning to charge the fees that will pay for the debt, that will pay for those. It'll be about a 15-year debt service, and as you just heard, it's about a 15-year life, so that's a fee that, again, that once we have it built in, will help us replace those eventually when their life cycle's over.
So we're gonna constantly be seeing from now on the $2, $2, $2. We are.
Yeah, and we've highlighted it as things, so I think one of the reasons we highlight it is we want people to know that there's a whole lot of technology now available to them to look and manage their electric and water bill consumption. And do we have to highlight it? No, we could take that off and sort of, it would be built into the fee that's already there, but we opted to put it on there as so people will ask questions about how they can use that technology to better manage their consumption.
I don't feel like that goal was achieved. I feel like it just shows up as $2, $2, $2, and I don't understand why.
And we have a communication that is going out tonight or already has. I'm looking at Stacy, but we definitely want to get communication out to our residents about what those $2 fees are covering. Again, it was.
And is that more than just social media ways?
It's going to be on the back of the. It's going to be on the back of the next water bill for one, and then we'll use social media. And
is there going to be something on that water bill that says, "Look on the back of this water bill"? Because I don't ever look on the back of the water bill. No kidding. Just why would you? All I'm interested in is how much do I owe?
Well, I can, Ann can speak to this and Stacy too, but when people generally call us with questions, a lot of times they have looked on the back of their water bill, or we tell them to look on the web. So Ann, can you speak to how we help people?
And Mayor, we can certainly have the envelope stamp. Every bill that goes out, we have the capability for our printer, have the envelope stamp, the message, and the message can be, please read the back of your bill or something that we come up with. But I can certainly do that.
That would be awesome.
That'd be great.
Can the explanation be put on the front of the bill below the fees?
I can't add a field. I can add a field in that portion of your bill that's just a blank text bill. We could type something in there, but again, I have limited characters that I can type in there. I can always say in there, please read the back of your bill. But so many of our customers, like Mayor said, don't even open their bill. I mean, I'm the first to admit I hear that every day from a customer.
So what can we do to fix it?
What do we do to fix it?
No, what can we do?
I'm not sure because, again, I feel that we're being very transparent with this fee. I am not a Town of Clayton customer, and I know that I got a smart meter 4 years ago. I specifically called and asked if I was going to get an increase. I was told no, and my services did increase. They buried the fee. I'm convinced they buried the fee. It also happened in my second residence. They buried the fee also. So, I mean, I know that we have neighboring municipalities who are also using smart meters, and none of them are showing the fee. They're calling it something different. They might call it a technology fee, but it's not necessarily being called what I feel like we should tell our customers it is.
So if memory serves me right, what is actually on the bill says meter fee.
AMI. It says AMI.
You're correct, actually.
Yes, sir.
And how long will that fee be in effect? 15 years?
Forever and ever. I don't know an
So
end date.
why would it be forever and ever?
Once the system is paid for itself, there is ongoing cost with the system. I mean, there's definitely, this is not, we install these meters and there's nothing else we have to pay for. There are ongoing costs with these meters, and there will also be life cycle of approximately 15 years on a meter. So it's going to mean replacing a meter at some point in time.
Right. So the debt for this will be a 15-year borrow. So in theory, 15 years from now, we'll be replacing all of our meters yet again, and there'll be a cost, whatever it is at the day, to do that. So you can see this fee is being continued now. None of us can see that far in the future what that cost will actually be, or if they'll last 18 years instead of 15. But in theory, the fee in place will help support and sustain itself.
And the meters that we use today, what's the life cycle of what we use today? In electric?
20 years on the electric sees a whole lot less need to change out than water. But we've got water meters that have been in the ground a whole lot longer than 15, 20 years.
Well, here's something I didn't know. How much does a meter cost?
$165 roughly for a water meter.
$165.
Electrical, yeah, electric may be 125. Water meters right now are roughly 165.
Just out of curiosity, how many meter readers do we have?
Currently have 3. 2 serve as readers. One serves as the meter tech, who is the person who goes out and does rereads. You call me and you've said, my water reading's really high this month. So I'm having to roll a truck to do that. I'm having to roll a truck now to do the simple move in, move out.
We got 3 people doing water and electric.
Yes, sir.
3 trucks?
Yes, sir.
Be able to get the 2 and 2 and keep 1 and 1?
Going to be able to get rid of one. Going to be able to and I have one who serves as a full-time temporary employee. We knew this project was coming. So when I had a retirement 2 years ago, we didn't replace the position with a permanent staff person. We replaced it knowing that we were going to eventually get to this point. And I didn't want to hire someone. I mean, we have a lot of wisdom sitting over here, and I didn't want to hire someone and 2 to 3 years later walk in and say, whoops, you know. So we planned this so that we were bringing in and replacing my retirement person with a full-time temporary position.
After these are put in, what are they going to be doing all?
When the meters are being installed, exactly what they're doing now. After they're all installed. They'll be doing meter maintenance. They're going to have to still go out. As Andy mentioned, one of the beautiful parts of this system is an alarm. I'm so excited to have something like this. Dale and I are dealing with a situation now where my guys just happened to walk up on a house recently, and their meter's gone. The meters are gone. We don't know if they pull the meter. Well, we do know. They pull the meter and stuck it in their house. We have situations in town where people pull our meters because I don't get any kind of alarm. They pull our meter and they're putting in a Duke Energy meter. They're still getting connectivity to get power, but I have no idea about it, so I can't bill them. And unless my guys walk up on the situation and to go, oh, that's not a Town of Clayton meter, that's a Duke Energy meter. That's the only way we find out about this. Same thing with a leak. And I'm sorry, with the new system, we're going to be able to run a report every day, and it will alert us if something strange has happened. We have a place that someone's moved out of, but all of a sudden they have electricity. That meter is registering kilowatt hours. We're going to be able to go and investigate right now. Not in a month, not hopefully in a month when we find the situation. Same thing with leaks. Many of you have called me and said, something's really weird. Or my girls have called you guys and said, for whatever reason, this property that you own for this month, the water consumption is now 10 times what it should have been. Well, with the AMI meters, we're going to see that immediately. You, through the customer portal, will be able to sign up to get those alerts yourself. But then, again, my staff every day can run a report and it'll say, okay, Mr. Satterfield, something just happened at your property, and we want to investigate and see what it is. And we'll be able to look at time consumption. We'll be able to look at that consumption happened between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. That might be a toilet leaking. That's something that's out of the norm. And we're hopefully going to find those things out, again, quicker now in the future than we do now, because we wait 30 days until we do a reading, and we call you or you call me.
And I have.
Yes, you have.
So have I.
Other questions or comments for staff?
I just want to thank Ann and the team for, this is a great example of how we can doing things to better serve the citizens and, get in return for your investment. And I can defend that $2 easily, based on, the information that's been presented to us tonight.
I think the thing that's exciting about this too is that it gives the customer more control, which ultimately could be pretty exciting.
This is what people are asking. They're asking. So they're asking for it. And one of the things that I've said 13 years is that I I want my staff to be more proactive, and we can't be. We spend so much of our time reacting to something. So this is our first step in really, truly being proactive for a customer, and a customer taking responsibility for their bills too, and being able to see it more timely.
Okay, so we've heard about all this awesome technology that the AMI project brings us. Now we get into how we pay for this. Davenport solicited an RFP on behalf of the town. They got bids back from 10 banks. If you look at the screen here in your package, you'll see they're kind of ranked in order of the interest rate. Column A is the lender, column B is bank qualified. For you, the easiest thing to say for bank qualified, think tax exempt. That's an advantage to the lender. Non-bank qualified, it's not tax exempt. So if you look there, what's kind of unique here is that all the banks from number 3 through 10, their rate for BQ and non-bank qualified is the same. So that kind of tells you that they have no incentive to do a non-bank a bank qualified rate. It's no advantage to them. BB&T, back when the town was last in the market, that was kind of the norm. You'd see a lower rate for a bank qualified. They're showing 2.94 and a higher rate for non-bank qualified. What this happens this time around, Bank of America has kind of got it inverted. They're actually giving us a lower rate. It's limited to the actual lowest bid, but their bid for non-qualified bank financing is lower than a BQ rate. So the recommendation from Davenport and staff concurs is that we would go with the Bank of America bid offer at 15 years at 2.6294%. That's 15 years financing. The one thing I want to show you, we were talking about the AMI fee and how we're going to pay for this. Davenport ran a little analysis for us based upon where we start out with our existing meters and that meter fee, and you'll see the revenues available. So starting out in fiscal 2020, this upcoming budget year, we're saying we're going to collect a little over $379,000 in AMI meter fees, and that's going to escalate. We very conservative growth rate each year thereafter based upon the number of new meter installs each year. And you can see in the level debt service, based upon a $5 million financing, you can see what that payment is. In the far right-hand column, you're going to see what is left over at the end of each year. So when we get to year 15, which is when the debt service is paid off, we have a reserve balance built up of, over $900,000. So at the end of the useful life of this project, you go 15 years, we still have a reserve on the books of a little over $900,000 that we can use to replace the technology. By that time, there'll be probably some new, greater, latest and greatest technology, but we're going to have a reserve that we're going to accumulate and we'll be using. So not only can we cover the debt service, we're also going to be in a position to move on to the next phase when it comes time to replace that. Okay? So with that, we're asking council to approve the recommendation, accept the recommendation, as well as to authorize us to file an application with the LGC to see this financing. So what would happen is we would file the application with the LGC. The goal would be to get it on their agenda for approval in July. Assuming the LGC approves the financing, we have no reason to believe that they wouldn't. We would expect to close on this financing probably as early as mid to late July.
Cool. Questions or comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt the resolution 2019-16.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for adoption of the resolution as presented. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, we're going to call for a 15-minute recess.
Don't get in the way. Go ahead, Jason. Jason, the words.
agreement with the county. I can go through item by item, but there's not a lot of changes in it. Everything you look at in the summary of changes, we're abiding by, we're following through with the county. Some years ago, this agreement was started, and guess who started that agreement? Town of Clayton and Clayton, for Claytex with the county. So I have the originals that I can give the clerk if you okay the agreement, so we can get them back to the commissioners for their meeting before July 1st.
Questions or comments for the chief? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
We approve execution of the agreement. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the execution of the agreements. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Up next is the budget amendment to Campo and the LAP projects.
Hey, Mayor, members of council, Robert McKay, Finance Director. Tonight we're asking council to approve two budget amendments. One is the first one is for the capital project ordinance for the Campo LAP project. This budget amendment reflects the recent realignment of funding that we're getting from Campo, the 80-20 versus 50-50. So we're amending the capital project budget ordinance to firm that up. And you can see in the budget amendment that results in a little over $716,000 reduction in town funding because of the change going from 50-50 to 80-20. At the same time, it's going to require an additional contribution from the town of $88,900. And that funding's coming from the special revenue fund, is where we collect our fee in lieu revenues.
Awesome. Questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we approve the execution of the agreement for the Campo LAP project.
Second.
Need adoption of two ordinances, please.
Adoption of ordinances 2019-06-03 and 2019-06-04.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the two ordinances. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Up next is the general obligation bond resolution for park and recreation facilities.
Okay, tonight we have a malady to kind of keep the train on the tracks, moving forward in the right direction, so we stay on schedule with our GO bond referendum in the fall. We have a findings resolution to issue the GO bonds in conjunction with a resolution to file an application with the LGC for approval of the issuance. We're going to come back to council in July, the July 15th meeting with the actual bond order. And in that bond order, we'll have, if we need to, we'll firm up the dollar amount. Right now, it's just 18 million is the cap, as well as any language, fine-tuning the language that actually be in the bond referendum. But right now, the resolution, it's very broad language, general, just references basically park and recreational facilities. It's not tied to any specific project.
All right, questions or comments? Mr. Granis?
Mayor, make a motion that we approve the adoption of resolutions 2019-17 and 2019-18, general obligation bond resolutions for park and rec facilities.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Up next is staff reports, beginning with the town manager.
No report?
Town attorney.
No report.
Town clerk.
No reports, thank you.
Up next, a report from other staff, the Main and Fayetteville Streets traffic review update.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Blair Myham, Police Chief. Several weeks ago, you asked me to look at Main and Fayetteville, and as it relates to traffic accidents and the safety of that intersection. So wanted to come before you tonight and kind of give you an update on that intersection. So let me give you some data, and I'll explain the illustration that you see in front of you. So Main and Fayetteville has seen 14 wrecks over a 3-year period. That makes it number 1 of all intersections downtown and number 15 overall throughout the entire town. All of those crashes that we've had on that street have all been angle wrecks, meaning that they were, for lack of a better term, broadside wrecks, you know, car hit from a 90-degree angle. Let's see, right now, in this illustration, Bobby asked me this on the break, this illustration is the same on the north side and the south side. So we take some assumptions with this, and that is that a car is driving at 25 miles an hour along Main Street. So that's an assumption based for this illustration here, and that those are cars parked at the closest legal parking space on the street. And so what that shows you right now is that with cars parked along the street there, if a car pulls up and stops at the white stop bar, they have less than 1 second to make a decision on whether or not they can proceed into the intersection. And so what I'm able to do tonight is give you some options on things that we can consider as far as the town moving forward to improve the safety for pedestrians and for motor vehicles at that intersection. So one option is to remove parking spaces, and I know that parking is a premium, and there's a lot of discussion that we've had, and of course, businesses don't want to lose parking spaces directly in front of their business, but one parking space increases the sightline radius of 37%, 2 spaces makes it 54%, which gives the motorist on Fayetteville Street enough time to decide whether or not they think they can pull forward. Because as you can see, what's shown in red is an area that they can't see a car coming, and so a car could be at O'Neill Street traveling at 25 miles an hour, and if that car pulls out, they'll intersect with each other. So that, where you see the vehicle at O'Neill Street is the last point where if a car was there and a car came across Fayetteville Street coming from a stop position, it would make it through the intersection without being hit. But as soon as it crosses into that red zone, at any point in that point, if a car accelerated from 0 to 15, getting across the intersection, and the car on Main Street was at 25, there would be a collision. So we recognize that there's some concerns there at that intersection. I think it's important to note that Main and Fayetteville is from, at least from O'Neill Street east, is the only 4-way intersection doesn't have a signal on it. And so that may be one of the reasons why it contributes to having a high number of wrecks. And so it's 14 over 3 years. It's not, you know, significant, but unless you're hit, but we didn't account for any of the wrecks where cars were hit that were parked on the side of the street, like, you know, former Councilman Lauder's car. So I think there are some improvements that we could make, either by removing some parking there, potentially asking NCDOT to signalize that intersection if that was something that we thought was more appropriate. There could also be maybe an opportunity to put the convex mirrors up that might give somebody a little bit more sight radius. But this doesn't really change how pedestrians, really how vehicles driving down Main Street would be able to see pedestrians, because some of the parallel parking spaces are so close to that crosswalk that they're not able to see them real well, and I've seen that firsthand myself. So I know that Councilman Bunn asked for this information a few weeks ago, so I wanted to come back and present what we were able to find through our research and maybe give you something to think about for some considerations on how we move forward with this, improving this intersection.
Satterfield.
Usually we ask for recommendation.
Exactly what I was gonna do. What do you recommend?
Well, what I would recommend from a public safety standpoint probably isn't popular with business owners, but I would recommend removing at least one parking space on each of the sides closest to the intersection, because that, like I said, gives us a 37%. And I think can you go to the next slide? I don't have. So you see the green space there, and on the next slide we show that's taking 2 spaces away, and you can see how much greater the sight distance is. So 2 might be more than folks are willing to take, but I think even taking 1 space away increases that sight distance and improves our safety.
What did you do down at Vincent's? How many did we take down there?
I don't know how many, they weren't really marked as spaces, but we took a considerable distance, and I want to say it was over 100 feet that we took away over in front of Vincent's on the opposite side of the street for parking.
What would that be? How many cars would that be?
I think it was 3 or 4 spaces, but again, at that point, it was 35 miles an hour, so that went into our consideration as well. We were looking at about 186-foot sight distance that we needed to create, and we took away, I think, about 100 feet.
Thank you, Blair, for doing this. Thank you.
I am more inclined to try. Obviously, nobody wants to do away with parking and do anything that's not, that's not to be helpful to business, but I think safety is more important, and I would be more inclined to try doing away with 1 space in all 4 quadrants and see if that will help us experience a decline or just what the result is. I think if we find that our numbers still continue there, or it still shows up as a trouble spot, then we could look at 2, but I think it would be worth just trying to start off with to do removing 1 parking place each. I'm not really sure how far we would get with DOT and trying to put traffic lights up, but the only thing that bothers me about putting a traffic signal there is that I'm wondering how much traffic would be diverted over to Front Street for that quick run to 42 East. Because if I have another additional stoplight to go through and traveling towards Central Street to be able to do that, I'm afraid, if there's 1 more stoplight in the way, people would figure out how to go around that and be able to zoom 35 miles an hour nonstop. Right.
Have we thought about a 4-way stop?
Have we thought about a 4-way stop?
It is an option. I think traffic engineers would probably more a better person to ask to see if that's something that I think will improve it. Some of the research that I've been told over years is that 4-way, stop sign intersections don't actually improve the safety of an intersection. I don't know that from a traffic management standpoint of having a signalized intersection, either through stop signs or a light there, so close to another one, improves safety or degrades traffic safety. I don't really know. I think that taking away 1 space on either side, on all 4 sides, is going to give us an improvement and give anyone stopped on Fayetteville more time to decide whether or not it's safe for them to pull into the intersection. And I think it's a good first step. We can always take the paint back off if we decide that we want to approach NCDOT about some sort of additional traffic calming devices, but I don't know that that's the best first step in this. I wanted to bring this to your attention because I know that I'm sure Boulevard might not be happy about losing space, nor might the bank. The other side of the street doesn't really have, quite the same concerns, but we would need to take those spaces from all 4 sides to be able to improve safety in both directions for either side of the street.
I think that's going to affect them because of areas that are no parking already, they still park there. I squeezed in my car one morning. I had to get up next to it legally parked. Walked in, Another car parked right behind me, his built back. He stayed 10, 15 minutes.
That's my concern. People are used to parking there. They're also used to parking on yellow mark now.
Well, I'll say the marks that are there now are just kind of the yellow curbing. And if we do more of what we did over in front of Vincent's where we paint the street, it's a lot more clear that there's no parking there. And to my knowledge, I haven't seen any violations of parking across from Vincent since we made it very clear that there was no parking there. And I would suggest that, when
That'd be helpful.
we work with staff to the street department to do the same sort of marking.
I think we're in agreement to try to reduce a parking place on every quadrant and see how that works.
Roger.
Just keep us posted. All right. Thank you, sir.
I wanted to ask staff to enforce no parking. Does town not need to adopt an ordinance to change parking? Kimberly, do you know the answer?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Need a formal action within the ordinance to change no parking on that street?
We do not.
Yeah, I don't think we did with Vincent's, nor did David. No.
Okay.
Has to be posted.
Gotcha. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. I'll now open the floor for informal discussion and public comment. No one wishing to speak. I'll turn it over to council for comments. No one wishing to speak. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Good night.